Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes, I am. I have my documents.
Prove it!
Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine this. You have spent your entire life in one city. You were born there. You grew up on its streets. You went to school there, built a career there, and every single night you walk into a building where you save lives. You do everything right. You show up. You care. You give everything you have to the people who need you the most. Now imagine that one night, on your way to do exactly that, two men step out of the shadows and tell you that you do not belong here. Not because of anything you did, not because of anything you said, but because of how you look. That is exactly what happened to a woman named Clara on a freezing night in the city of Detroit. And the security camera footage that captured it sat silently in black and white. But what it recorded was loud enough to shake an entire nation and cost the federal government $2 million. This is her story, and once you hear it, you will never forget it. Before we dive into this story, I need you to do something for me. If you're watching this for the first time, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, they need to be told. They need to be heard. They need to be remembered so they never, ever happen again. It was the kind of cold that Detroit gets in the dead of winter, the kind that cuts right through your clothes and settles into your bones before you even realize it. The kind of cold that makes you walk faster, talk less, and think about nothing else except getting somewhere warm. Clara knew that cold well. She had lived in Detroit her whole life, 32 years, born at a hospital not even 10 miles from where she was standing that night. She had grown up in the city, gone to school in the city, and now she was one of the most dedicated nurses working in the intensive care unit at a major hospital right in the heart of it. Clara was not a complicated woman. She did not ask for fame or attention. She asked for nothing except the chance to do her job, to walk into that unit every night and be the person standing between her patients and the worst moments of their lives. And on this particular night, all she wanted to do was get inside. Her shift was about to begin. 12 hours. 12 long hours of checking vitals, administering medication, and staying calm when everyone around her was scared. The patients in the ICU were not there for minor things. These were people fighting for their lives, and Clara was one of the nurses responsible for keeping them alive. She had called a rideshare from her apartment because she was already tired before the shift even started. It had been a long few days, and she wanted to save whatever energy she had left for the people who needed her at the hospital. So she sat in the back of the cab, quiet, calm, her bag on her lap and her lunch tucked beside her, watching the city lights blur past the window. But something was not right that night. Clara felt it the moment she stepped outside her building to wait for her ride. A feeling she could not explain. A weight in the air. The kind of thing that does not make sense when you try to put it into words, but your body knows it before your mind catches up. She felt like someone was watching her. As the car moved through the streets, she glanced out the back window and noticed a dark sedan keeping pace with them. Block after block, it stayed there. Not too close, not too far, just there, following. Clara told herself she was being paranoid. People drive on the same roads all the time. It meant nothing. It was probably nothing. And then her driver turned left. The sedan did not follow. Clara let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Relief washed over her like warm water. It was nothing. It was just a car on the road. She was safe. But that relief, that small, quiet moment of peace, was about to be stolen from her forever. The rideshare pulled up to the curb near the staff entrance of the hospital, and this was the side of the building that most people never see. No grand lobby, no bright fluorescent welcome signs, just a quiet stretch of sidewalk with a set of glass doors, a security camera mounted above the frame, and a small sign that said staff only. At this hour, it was usually empty. Silent. The kind of place where nurses and doctors slipped in and out without fanfare, just doing their jobs. Clara thanked her driver, grabbed her things, and stepped out into the freezing air. The cold hit her face immediately, sharp and unforgiving. She closed the car door and turned toward the glass doors. Warmth was right there. Safety was right there. All she had to do was walk 20 feet and push through. She never got the chance. Movement. Out of the corner of her eye, fast and purposeful, eye coming from the direction of a parking structure nearby. Clara turned her head and her heart stopped. Two men were running toward her, not jogging, not walking quickly, running, with a speed and direction that said they were not lost, not confused, and not looking for someone else. They were coming straight for her. Clara's brain locked up for a second, the part of you that freezes when something happens so fast that your body cannot decide what to do. Should she scream? Should she run? Should she turn and sprint back to the car that was already pulling away? She did not get to choose, because before any of those options could become actions, the two men were standing directly in front of her, close enough to touch, close enough that she could see the yellow lettering on their tactical vests, the radios clipped to their belts, the holstered weapons at their sides. They were not muggers. They were not lost tourists. They were federal agents, men with badges and authority and the weight of the government behind them. Their names were David and Samuel, and they were looking at Clara the way a hunter looks at something it has already decided to catch. The security camera above the door captured all of it. Silent, black and white. But every frame told a story. David was the one who spoke first. He stepped forward, positioning himself directly in Clara's path, and he did not waste a single second on pleasantries. He did not say good evening. He did not ask if she needed help. He did not notice the hospital scrubs she was wearing, the blue uniform that every nurse in the country puts on every single day. He did not notice the ID badge clipped to her chest, right there in plain sight, with her name and her photo, and the name of the hospital printed clearly on it. He looked at her, and he demanded to know her status. "Are you a U.S. citizen?" Clara blinked. She was so caught off guard by the question that for a moment she did not even process it. A citizen? Of course she was a citizen. She was born here. This was her city. This was her home. She had never lived anywhere else in her entire life. She told them that. She told them she was American. She told them she was late for work. She pointed at the hospital doors, the ones that were right there, just a few steps away. And she told them that her patients were waiting for her, that the charge nurse would be wondering where she was, that people inside that building needed her right now. David did not move. He stepped closer instead, into her space, into the kind of closeness that is not a conversation, but a threat. He told her that her work did not matter right now, that she was not going anywhere until she proved to him that she had the legal right to be in this country. Clara felt something shift inside her chest, a cold realization settling in alongside the freezing air. These men had already made up their minds. Before they ever opened their mouths, before they ever said a single word to her, they had already decided what she was, and nothing she said was going to change that. She reached into her bag, her driver's license, a government-issued ID, the kind of document that proves in a legal and official way that you are who you say you are. Clara pulled it out and handed it to David, hoping, truly hoping, that it would be enough, that he would look at it, would see her name, see her photo, see that it was issued by the state of Michigan, and step aside. David took the card. He held it up under the harsh orange glow of the streetlight and looked at it. Clara watched his face. She watched his eyes move across the plastic. She waited. And then he laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or an awkward laugh. It was cold, dismissive. The kind of laugh that says, "I already know this means nothing to me." He turned to Samuel and shook his head, as if Clara had handed him a crayon drawing instead of a legal document. Then he looked back at her, and his eyes were empty. Not angry, not even cruel exactly, just empty. Like she was not even a person standing in front of him, like she was a problem to be dealt with. He handed the license back and told her it proved nothing about citizenship. Won't that anyone could get a driver's license? Clara stood there shaking. And it was not just the cold anymore. She did not have her birth certificate with her. She did not have a passport. Why would she? She was a nurse going to work in her own hometown on a Wednesday night. No one carries a passport to walk into a hospital. No one thinks they need to prove they belong in the place they were born. She tried again. She spoke calmly, even though her hands would not stop trembling. She told them she had gone to school in Detroit, that her records were in the system, that she had lived here her entire life. Samuel, who had been standing behind David like a shadow the entire time, finally opened his mouth. But it was not to help her. It was not to say that maybe they had the wrong person. He told Clara that she matched the description of someone they were looking for. Clara asked him to show her. A photo, a name, anything. He had nothing. No picture, no document, no name, just a vague, shapeless claim that kept her pinned to that sidewalk like a butterfly under glass. The security footage shows Clara hugging her arms around her body, trying to keep warm, her shoulders hunched against the wind. David and Samuel stood across from her in their heavy tactical jackets, barely affected by the temperature. They had the warmth. They had the authority. They had the power. Clara had nothing but the truth, and the truth was not enough. She tried to move, not to run, not to fight. She simply tried to step around David, angling her body toward the door, hoping that if she got close enough, the automatic sensors would catch her and the glass would slide open and she could disappear inside where she was supposed to be. David moved his body to block her, and his hand drifted toward his belt. Clara stopped. She stopped because she understood, in that moment, exactly what the stakes were. If she kept moving, if she pushed past him, if she did anything that could be called resistance, they could hurt her. They could arrest her. They could take her somewhere far from this hospital, far from her patients, far from everything she had built. And the people in that ICU, the sick ones, the scared ones, the ones who depended on her showing up, they would suffer because she was not there. So she stood still, terrified, but still. And then David said it. He looked at Clara. He looked at her face, her skin, her hair. Mike, he looked at her the way someone looks at a stranger in a foreign country. And he said, clearly, with total confidence, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "Nothing shows that you are from here. I mean, looking at you." The words landed like a physical blow. Clara had spent her entire life in this city. She had been born in a hospital less than 10 miles away. English was her first language. She had gone to school here, built a life here, and every single night she walked into a building and fought to keep strangers alive. And this man, this federal agent with a badge and a weapon, looked at her and decided, based on nothing but the way she looked, that she did not belong. The camera caught her reaction. A slight drop of the head, a pause, and then she looked back up at him, and there were tears forming in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of something deeper, something that lives in the space between disbelief and fury. She asked him what an American was supposed to look like. David did not answer. He could not answer, because there is no answer to that question that does not expose exactly what was happening on that sidewalk. This was never about paperwork. This was never about a legitimate investigation. This was about how Clara looked, about the assumptions that two men in tactical gear made the moment they saw a black woman standing alone outside a hospital at night. David, unwilling to let the encounter end, demanded that Clara unlock her phone. He wanted to look through her contacts, her messages, her call history. He called it part of an investigation. Clara knew her rights. She knew that without a warrant, they could not search her phone. So she refused. Quietly, firmly. She put the phone back in her pocket and held it there. David's face changed. The emptiness in his eyes turned to something sharper. He moved closer, his face inches from hers, and raised his voice. He told her she was resisting a federal agent, that he could take her to a detention center right now if he wanted to. Clara did not move. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry, even though everything inside her was screaming. She told him that if he arrested her, he would have to explain to the hospital why an entire unit of critically ill patients was left without a nurse. It was not a threat. It was the truth. And David knew it. Inside the hospital, the world was moving on without knowing what was happening just outside the glass. But not everyone was looking the other way. A colleague of Clara's, another nurse named Patricia, who was finishing her own shift, happened to walk past the front doors as she headed toward the parking lot. She glanced out into the night and stopped. She saw them. Two large men. Clara, the concrete pillar. The way Clara's body was angled, like someone trying to make herself smaller. the way David was leaning over her. Patricia did not need to hear a single word to know that something was very, very wrong. She turned and ran to the security desk. The guard, a broad-shouldered man named Thomas who took his job with a quiet seriousness, was looking at his phone when Patricia reached him. She pointed frantically at the doors, her voice sharp and urgent, and Thomas was on his feet before she finished her sentence. He grabbed his radio and walked toward the automatic doors with the kind of steady purpose that comes from years of knowing exactly what his job is. The doors slid open. The sound of them parting cut through the cold air like a signal flare, and David and Samuel both turned their heads at the same time. Thomas stepped out onto the sidewalk, Patricia right behind him, and the energy of the entire encounter shifted in an instant. Thomas did not raise his voice. He did not have to. He simply asked what was going on and why two men were standing on hospital property, harassing a member of his staff. David flashed his badge, told Thomas to back off, said this was federal business. Thomas did not back off. He moved to Clara's side and stood there, a physical wall between her and the two agents. Patricia reached out and gently took Clara's arm, pulling her toward the door, telling her it was time to go inside. David's jaw tightened. He took a half step forward, like he wanted to stop them, but he saw Thomas standing there, calm and unmovable, and he saw the small crowd of movement beginning to gather inside the lobby as other staff members noticed what was happening. He saw that the shadows he had been operating in were gone now, replaced by light and witnesses, and a camera that had been recording the entire time. Samuel leaned in and whispered something to David. Whatever he said, it worked. David's shoulders dropped slightly. He looked at Clara one final time, pointed a finger at her, and told her this was not over. Clara turned and walked through the glass doors. The warm air hit her skin and her legs almost gave out. She did not collapse, but she had to lean against the wall in the lobby for a moment, pressing her back against the cool surface, just breathing. Patricia's hand was on her shoulder, asking if she was okay, if she was hurt, if she needed to sit down. Clara shook her head. She was not okay, but she was not going to let this break her. Not tonight, not ever. She went to the locker room. She washed her face. She looked at herself in the mirror and took a breath that came from somewhere deep and stubborn inside her. And then she walked to her unit, and she did her job. She checked vitals. She administered medication. She held the hand of a patient who was scared and told them it was going to be okay, because that is who Clara is. But she also made a decision that night. A quiet, firm, unshakable decision. She was not going to let this disappear. Because if they did this to her, a nurse in scrubs with a badge, standing 10 feet from a hospital door, then they would do it to someone else. Someone who might not have a colleague walking past at the right moment. Someone who might not have a security guard who cared. Someone who might not survive the encounter at all. Clara was not going to let that happen. The very next morning, after her shift ended and the sun was barely up over the Detroit skyline, Clara picked up the phone and called a lawyer. His name was Richard. He was not a flashy man. He did not wear expensive suits or make big promises, but he had a reputation for doing something that most lawyers are afraid to do. He took on the government, and he won. Clara told him everything, from the sedan she saw on the way to work to the two men running out of the shadows. To the moment David looked at her and said she did not look like she belonged in her own country. Richard listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he did not say, "I'm sorry," or "That's terrible." He said, "We need that footage." He contacted the hospital that same day and filed an emergency request to preserve the security camera recording before it could be overwritten or deleted. The hospital cooperated immediately. And when Richard sat down and watched the footage for the first time, he saw everything Clara had described. The approach, the blocking, the body language, the aggression, all of it captured in silent black and white, frame by frame. But Richard knew that video alone, without sound, could be interpreted in more than one way. A good defense lawyer could stand in a courtroom and argue that the agents were simply doing their jobs, that the confrontation looked intense but was routine, that Clara had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Richard needed more. And then something extraordinary happened. During the legal discovery process, the part where both sides are required to hand over evidence, Richard's team learned that David and Samuel had body-mounted microphones during the encounter, standard equipment for federal agents, and on that particular night, they had forgotten to turn them off. The audio was crystal clear. Richard synced the body camera audio with the security footage, and for the first time, the black and white silent images became a scene with a voice. And in that voice, David's voice, calm and confident and completely unaware that he was creating evidence against himself, the words played out exactly as Clara had described them. "Nothing shows that you are from here. I mean, looking at you." Richard said later that when he heard those words for the first time in his office, alone, with the footage playing on his laptop, he felt something he had not felt in years of practicing law. He felt rage, real, burning rage, but he also felt something else. He felt certainty, because that sentence, that single, careless, devastating sentence, was not a slip of the tongue. It was not taken out of context. It was the center of everything. It was the reason Clara had been stopped. It was the reason she had been held. It was the reason she had been told she did not belong. And now it was on tape. The lawsuit was filed within weeks. Clara's legal team accused the federal agency of violating her constitutional rights: unlawful detention, racial profiling, emotional distress, the kind of charges that, in any other situation, might take years to resolve in court. But the evidence in this case was not something that could be argued away or buried under legal language. The government's lawyers tried. They stood up and said the agents were simply following a lead, that the encounter was lawful, that Clara had been cooperative, but the situation required further questioning. Richard dismantled that argument with one question. What lead? What intelligence? What evidence did these agents have before they approached a nurse in hospital scrubs at the entrance of a medical facility? The answer, of course, was nothing. There was no lead, no photograph, no name, no intelligence report. There was only a black woman walking toward a door, and two men who decided, based on nothing but how she looked, that she was a threat. The settlement came faster than almost anyone expected. The government did not want a trial. A trial would have meant playing that audio in a packed courtroom. It would have meant letting the public hear David's voice say those words out loud, in front of cameras, in front of reporters, in front of the entire country. It would have been devastating, not just legally, but publicly. For the agency, for the men involved, for everyone who had signed off on the operation. So, they settled. Clara was awarded $2 million. $2 million for one night, for 20 minutes on a sidewalk, for being told by men with badges and weapons that she did not look like she belonged in the country where she was born. But here's what matters most about that number. Clara has said in interviews since the settlement that the money was never the point. $2 million does not undo the way she felt standing on that sidewalk. It does not erase the sound of David's laugh when he looked at her driver's license. It does not remove the image of his empty eyes from her memory. No amount of money can do that. What the settlement did, what it truly did, was force an admission. An official, documented, legal admission that what happened to Clara that night was wrong, that the agents acted unlawfully, that the stop was not based on evidence or intelligence, but on assumption, on prejudice, on the dangerous, ugly belief that someone's citizenship can be measured by the color of their skin. David and Samuel faced disciplinary action. The details of exactly what happened to them have not all been made public, but the story, Clara's story, spread far beyond Detroit. It was covered by national media. It was shared millions of times. It became a conversation about who gets to be seen as American and who gets questioned for simply existing in their own home. Clara still works as a nurse. She still walks through those same glass doors every night, the same ones she was blocked from entering on that freezing night. The same camera still watches from above, recording in silent black and white, a quiet witness to everyone who passes beneath it. But Clara does not walk through those doors the way she used to. She used to walk with her head down, focused on the shift ahead, thinking about her patients and nothing else. Now she walks with her head up, not out of arrogance, not out of anger, out of something quieter and stronger than both of those things. She walks through those doors knowing that she stood her ground, that she did not break, that when two men with badges and weapons told her she did not belong, she looked them in the eye and refused to disappear. And the camera above the door, the same one that recorded everything that night, still sits there, still watches. A silent reminder that someone is always paying attention, that the truth, even when no one speaks it out loud, has a way of being captured. And once it is captured, it cannot be erased. Clara's story is not just about one night in Detroit. It is about every person who has ever walked into a room and been told, without words, that they do not fit. Every person who has been asked to prove something that should never need proving. Every person who has been looked at and seen as something other than what they truly are. Clara proved that night, not with words, but with the way she stood, the way she refused to move, the way she walked back into that hospital and cared for her patients as if the world had not just tried to tell her she was not part of it. That belonging is not something anyone can take from you. It is something you carry inside yourself, and no badge, no weapon, no cold stare can ever reach it. So the next time you walk through a door that should be open to you, walk through it like Clara does. Head up, eyes forward. Knowing exactly where you come from, are exactly who you are, and exactly where you belong. Because you have always belonged, and no one gets to tell you otherwise. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.